Good morning, everyone. It's almost afternoon. My name's Allison Michaels. I am so excited to be here. I am a longtime Yammer fan. I was actually a Yammer customer way back in the day and kind of found myself on the Yammer team and have been with Yammer for a long time. And I kind of took a little bit, I'll say not a break at all because it definitely wasn't, but I kind of took a little bit of a different route and I'm back with the Yammer folks and it has been a lot of fun. And so I'm also very excited to be with my co-presenter Steve. He and I have been on the road together a variety of times, so it's good to be back with him.
Yeah, hi. My name is Steve Wynn, Yammer Product Evangelist. With the Yammer product team, I, like Allison, have been with Yammer for quite a while. Previously as a customer success manager, we go way back. Probably not as far back as Rhonda and your first solar days, but yeah. So we have some experience to share in Yammer usage and adoption. Talk you through some scenarios of how we've seen both Microsoft and some of our customers using Yammer. Hopefully that'll be valuable for you, and hopefully that's what you came here for. Before we get too far, we always like to get a pulse, get a sense of the audience. How many of you would say you're using Yammer to its fullest? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you say could use some improvement, could do better using it in pockets? Okay. And how many of you, not at all? You're still trying to figure it out.
Welcome.
Okay. Welcome.
So good to have you.
So thank you for being here. So just to level set, it's earlier in the week. Hopefully perhaps you haven't seen this slide a whole lot and you're not sick of it just yet. But we like to just ground ourselves initially and just talk about Microsoft 365 as an overall toolkit for teamwork and for productivity. So we offer email and calendar. Obviously, that's tried and true within your organizations. Everybody generally knows how to use email and calendar, and that's a core part of Microsoft 365. SharePoint for intranets and team sites and document collaboration. Increasingly, things like communication sites help make it easier than ever to create rich and engaging content. Yammer for connecting people across your organization. This is the area, of course, that we'll dig deeper in today, but we've always felt that Yammer is kind of the connective tissue to connect your employees and your information across your company, across your organizations. Office applications, so Excel, Word, PowerPoint, those are kind of your workhorses for co-authoring, co-creating, or just creating documents in general. In the lead up to Ignite, many of us here at Microsoft, we're heads down in PowerPoint and Excel and Word, daily applications for us. And of course, Teams as your hub for teamwork, your small teams really working together to get work done. Teams really has become the hub for a lot of people to get their work done as well. And all of this is connected through a foundational layer of Office 365 groups. So you have this membership layer that spans across Office 365 that gives you access to different types of applications and services. We also connect this through the Microsoft Graph, so pulling information from each one of these service areas so that the Microsoft 365 experience becomes much more relevant, and that will also continue to improve over time. And all of this with the same Microsoft security that we all know that you come to Microsoft for. So if we dig into each one of these, if it's okay if we take questions at the end, we just have a lot of content, if you wouldn't mind, thank you. So just to dig into each one of these, and we know that the which tool when conversation is pretty common within a lot of your organizations. And this isn't meant to be all-inclusive by any means. It's really hard to boil it down into one slide, but we hope that this provides some initial guidance for you. So like I said, no need to really get into a lot of detail on email and calendar. With intranets and SharePoint, with intranets and content management, being able to create content, spin up content easily using some of the new tools that we've made available, and being able to share files, share content using OneDrive and SharePoint as well.
We placed a bet to see which slide would get most pictures, and we guessed this one, and I think I saw that.
And specific to Yammer, we see people using Yammer in some pretty specific ways, and we'll dig into each one of these, but generally it's around organizational type connections, communities, and also around initiatives. Let's go on to the next slide. So with Microsoft 365, we want to bring you a toolkit that really unlocks creativity across your organization. one that's built for teamwork, one that's integrated so that it's easier for your users to consume and use, and has intelligent security spread across the suite. And so we're focusing most on the built for teamwork portion today, how Yammer really connects people and information across your company to help them make better decisions faster. That's a core mission for us here at Yammer. And so how many of you yesterday were at the Yammer roadmap session? Okay, handful of you. So you may have heard us talk about some of these top use cases. For those of you that weren't there, we talked about how some of the patterns that we see in our customers using Yammer have generally been in these three categories, or these three patterns. The first one is around organizations. And organizations are generally described as, it could be a department, it could be a function, or it could be a job role. So these people within an organization are aligned to a specific organizational hierarchy, so to speak. Then there are communities. These people are usually organized around a common interest or a topic of interest. It could be spread across a number of different reasons that these people want to connect. But these are broad communities that spread across functions, across organizational lines. Then there's what we call initiatives. And these are things that oftentimes happen from the ground up. Your employees are creating these initiatives. Maybe they've come up with a new idea and they need to crowdsource some answers. Or they've identified a problem that they need more people and input to help to solve that problem. So initiatives are kind of things that have a limited duration. They have a specific goal. Employees contribute to that, and then they move on to the next thing. So we're going to dig into each one of these in some more detail. The first one we're going to talk about is the organizational connection type. And one of the most common ways for people to connect in this way is around executive communication. And so it's this notion of an executive being able to communicate two-way, executives, I should say, being able to communicate two-way across the organization. Allison, you have a lot of experience in this area, so why don't you take us through that?
Awesome, thanks so much. So personally, this is actually one of my favorite use cases of Yammer. I have worked with so many different customers, literally side by sides with CEOs and executives, trying to understand what could this look like if you as an executive could really engage in a two-way conversation. This is kind of more or less moving from a broadcast mentality to an engager mentality, or kind of this two-way conversation. A lot of times executives are really good at that broadcast, but trying to just really understand how else can they have that two-way communication. But how many of you would say this is kind of also a struggle, too, to get your leaders on board? Yeah, okay, only 3 of you? Yeah, right. The rest of you are probably lying. And one of the things that I think is so true to this is a lot of times we're asking leaders to be open, social, and transparent. And a lot of times that's not how they got to where they are today. And so these are really sometimes maybe could be quite fearful to understand what they could do and how they can really empower people and their employees on social technologies like Yammer. So if you go to the next slide, from a holistic perspective, thanks. Really, from a holistic perspective, again, the leaders are really trying to understand how can they engage their employees. One of the things that we've seen is that when leaders are not only from that broadcast mentality, but also kind of listening in to what employees are saying and how they are reacting to the changes within your organization, it's really, really impactful for the way to kind of continue to modernize their workforce or bring about change within their organization. So one of the ways that we actually do this at Microsoft, and I am working with the team and have been participating in a lot of these, not only at Microsoft, but at a lot of other organizations as well, is kind of this all hands or an Ask Me Anything, this live broadcast. And one of the ways our CEO group does this is we actually have a Yammer group for our CEO connection. And about once a month, we kind of say, hey, we're going to have a live Q&A. Let's gather some questions prior to that. And so sometimes we've got some really great questions ahead of time, and sometimes the questions really come day of as well. So you can kind of see we're starting the conversations before the event even happens. We're kind of generating awareness, and this is really good. Again, this doesn't necessarily always have to be about an executive, but any kind of town hall or kind of corporate event, this could be a really good format.
I think the other key around engaging pre-event is, the screenshot here shows Yammer, but the way that we're engaged oftentimes is email. And so we encourage you to not, think about all the channels to get engaged, but also think about the central place that you want to actually bring people. So CEO Connection within Microsoft, I would say, it's become quite a brand internally to where people just kind of know if you say CEO Connection, they do naturally gravitate to the group on Yammer. But I think that's been the work of the internal communications team to drive people that way. So even though people send an email, or even though the internal comms team sends an email to announce the Q&A, it is funneling people into the group to ask the questions. Don't email back. Don't respond back to the email with the question. That's not going to help anybody.
Right.
Go to the group. And any other communication that you see is really funneling people to that one place.
Yeah. And so when we've got the live broadcast, we actually have the ability to kind of have that Yammer feed. And so what actually happens is there is quite a busy back channel, as you can imagine, during the Q&A, because not everybody can attend in person, nor do I think everybody would want to attend in person, but everybody can kind of listen in, they can share their insights and their feedback kind of as the live session is going on. And then I would say kind of post-event, what happens is the team kind of creates snippets or different segments of the video, and then we go back to those questions in Yammer and say, hey, did you know we pulled your question from Yammer and Satya answered your question? And it's been really interesting because the employees might have been in Japan and they missed it live because of the time zone, and they would have had no idea that he actually answered their question live and in person kind of through the Q&A. So it's been really interesting to kind of get the feedback to close that loop once people kind of ask their question and know that he has answered it. So it's been really good to kind of see all the different things that we kind of do to build up to this sort of once a month or almost monthly event. So this is kind of a good way to have one. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, if you go back to the slide,
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to emphasize on this is that, so because we often get too caught up in the kind of the which tool when, I think people want to think that there's one tool that's going to do everything. But what I like about this example is that it shows the breadth of being able to use Office 365
Correct.
for each of these scenarios. I talked about using email for the pre-event, and then the day of the event, we're using Skype broadcast, and then post-event, we're using Stream and Yammer, and potentially even email to rebroadcast, what happened. So think about using the right tools for the right reasons versus thinking about the one thing that's going to do everything.
Yeah, lots of tools, lots of channels kind of going out, and a lot of different ways that people can continue the conversation too. So, and then the Q&As and the Ask Me Anythings are great for that one time a month, but what happens in between that? So for example, we've actually got quite a bit of conversations that happen in between the Q&As, and what happens is either Satya or his other SLT basically jump in there and kind of answer the question so they don't necessarily have to wait to the next Q&A to kind of have that conversation. So this has been really interesting, and then also a couple of the other kind of regional or district and other leaders have kind of spawned off their own versions of this as well. So one of our leaders, Chris Cap, he actually has his own kind of group, and he does a fantastic live Q&A. They do kind of the questions, and he's in there all the time, especially a couple days after and leading up to the event, and then kind of throughout the month to really get a pulse of what's being said and kind of the sentiment of the group. So he does a really good job. So I talked a little bit about the follow-up and the recap. That's just kind of a post saying, hey, here's a snippet. We call them snackables. Here's a snackable video, as oftentimes it's really hard to get somebody to watch an hour-long video, but they'll watch a 3-minute long of them answering that specific question, so that's a great example. And then ongoing top of mind, Satya actually released a book yesterday, so it's been really interesting. So he has shared kind of the backstory about the book and a little bit more in this group and kind of sharing specifically about the book. So kind of, again, his top of mind when he travels. He also kind of shares back what he's up to, a little bit about behind the scenes. And something that I would just really encourage as you think about this from an executive perspective is, yes, this is another channel, but don't just have your execs share things that they've already shared before, right? So if it's already on your intranet or if they've already posted an email about it, don't just redo the same email and post it on Yammer. One of the things that we're working with the team is really focusing on exclusive employee content that really like employees can't get elsewhere, right? And so really thinking about what could that be? That could be behind the scenes, their pictures of their customer meetings, or what did they really think about certain things? So just kind of thinking about it more in the behind the scenes and more of that exclusive content, because that having their personality show through is really, really very valuable from an employee engagement perspective. We can see the numbers of when Satya writes something and that you're like, oh, he just posted to a link or something like that, versus when he shares a personal story of his, the employees love that. They love listening to kind of his reactions to if you had watched a movie and it really impacted him or things like that. So it's a really good because it allows the executives to almost kind of feel like a human, right? And not just a CEO, and kind of level sets them to everyone else.
Yeah, I love the behind the scenes thing. There's another company that's adopted this scenario as well, and what they've done is they use the info panel in the right side of the Yammer group, and each week the CEO's team will update it with the CEO's schedule for the week and show what customer meetings he in this case is having, and then they'll post pictures during the week or post updates of those meetings. So I think that's pretty insightful, and I think in many ways it serves as a way to humanize these people, because we don't interact with these people on a day-to-day basis. And really that's what Yammer is about, is really about humanizing people, helping people make more human connections. And I think in a lot of ways it helps to set the tone for the rest of the organization on how you want your employees to interact with Yammer. A lot of people are gun shy because they're worried about if somebody going to post something inflammatory. Well, if you have your leadership really setting the tone by setting an example of what to post, that sets the tone for other people on what they should post as well.
Great. And this stuff takes time. This is not going to happen overnight. You kind of need people that your execs really trust and value to kind of move some of these conversations, because this definitely is not something, or maybe you had an exec go to some event and they heard about Yammer and they're the ones who spun up Yammer in the first place. I've also talked to customers like that and they're like, I need to rein him in. So, this definitely takes a little bit of time and foresight, but I think it's totally an opportunity for you to really engage with employees on Yammer. So, Steve, let's get going. Let's talk about communities of practice and what that could look like.
So I talked about how it's quite common for people within a company to want to connect around a community of interest or something that, some other attribute that they have personally that they're interested in. Let's talk about a few other Microsoft examples. Within Microsoft, we have this really vibrant Microsoft retail community. And this is a community for people that work with the retail industry or they work with retail customers. And it's a great place for employees in the field to share back what they're hearing from our retail and hospitality customers. What are some of their needs? What are some of the challenges that they're faced with? Conversely, it's a great way for our product teams to get feedback from these people on how to solve or how to handle certain challenges that they're having, and how does that affect the things that we're building as a company. And they use this group to share information about the latest trends that are happening in retail, what solutions that we need to build. So this has been a really great community for people that it's their day-to-day work. So there's different types of communities. This type of community is a community that if I'm a person that has retail customers, this community ends up being something that's valuable for me on a day-to-day basis. There's also this MS travel community, and this is probably not so relevant for me on a day-to-day basis, but it's still relevant to me if I'm a frequent traveler, right? This is a great community for me as somebody who might be on the road a lot, to be able to ask questions, get answers to travel policy related questions that I might have. Maybe get tips and tricks from other Microsoft travelers on, where can I get through TSA faster? Is there a Microsoft preferred line for me to go through at a specific airport? Again, this isn't a place that I'm going to go day to day. I don't necessarily need to be a member of the group, but it's helpful for me to know that this community of travelers within Microsoft exists for me to kind of pop in and out and pull information when I need to. An example is when I first joined Microsoft through the Yammer acquisition. I'm a tech geek, and so when I first joined the Yammer network, I'm joining the Xbox group, I'm joining the Surface group, I'm joining the Office 365 group, and all these groups were great, but as it turned out, none of them really helped me do my day-to-day job. So I ended up having to come back and prune a little bit, but just knowing that the Xbox group was there for when my kids had an issue and I could post there and get an answer was valuable. So again, two slightly different types of communities, but still valuable in different ways. So a couple of other examples. Oftentimes when I'm talking with customers, I love hearing from all of you. So please stop at the booth and come talk to us about how you're using Yammer. We love hearing your stories. But oftentimes when I'm talking with customers, they'll also ask me, how does Microsoft use Yammer? And we've shared a couple of examples so far, but a couple more. So we talked about the CEO connection group. Here it says 17,000 people connecting with the CEO, but that's just group membership, right? Again, the CEO connection group may not necessarily be one of those groups that you have to be a member of on a day-to-day basis to get value out of it. So it's really 100+ thousand Microsoft employees that engage, and they come in and out, depending on what's happening. There might be a Q&A going on or whatnot. Now this one I love. This one tends to blow people's minds a bit. So the Microsoft Teams team has a Yammer group, right? So they use this Yammer group to collect feedback from across Microsoft about Microsoft Teams. Now they could do that in a number of ways, right? They could use email, but who wants to use email to collect a bunch of feedback? They could use Teams, but there are some limitations to doing that. You'd have to know exactly who you want to get feedback from. So Yammer turns out to be a perfect place to be able to collect feedback from whomever across Microsoft about Microsoft Teams. So oftentimes we get into this, what's the difference between Teams and Yammer? And I love bringing up this example because oftentimes people kind of get it when I talk about it. There's the help desk group. So we've seen a number of examples of our customers using Yammer as a way to help their employees get help from one another, from a help desk IT support perspective. Our particular help desk group actually has a bot enabled with it. So if I ask a question about my VPN isn't working, it does a quick search and brings up a couple of articles or other issues related to that, and it pops that right into the thread. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, and then sometimes other people will chime in and provide a response. I will say that in a lot of cases, companies aren't using this as their official channel, but it's definitely a way to deflect a lot of the kind of easier questions that might come up and give your employees an opportunity to filter out and get some answers from each other rather than having to flood the help desk all the time. This is also a way that the help desk uses to push out messages about outages and downtimes, things like that. We also have a Yammer service updates group, and I welcome you all to join this. This is an external group that we use as a Yammer team to let you all know about new updates that we're pushing out. So it's a great way for us to be able to interact with all of you outside of Microsoft. It's a great way for all of you to interact with us and let us. We have customers going back and forth. Victoria is very active out there. Many others of you have been active in that group as well. So it's it's another great way for our customers to connect with each other, ask for help, get help from each other. And it's also a great way, we'll often post announcements about A/B tests that we're doing, things that aren't necessarily on the big roadmap, so you can get some insight into some of the things we're working on. If you'd like to be a member of that, just either let us know or stop by the booth, give us your email address, happy to invite you. And then this last one is we have a session later on today about it's around local data residency and compliance and security and kind of where we're headed with Yammer. And we have a whole team that's working on that, and they're using Yammer for a lot of that communication. 90 plus employees working across different functions to bring a lot of this work together. And I just share this as a way to show that, yes, you can use any number of tools to get work done. We've used email for decades, right, to get work done. There's Teams now to help you get work done. And for the longest time, people have been using Yammer to also get work done. The benefit that we've been able to see from people using Yammer for this is that people's work becomes more open, becomes more transparent. People are able to kind of peek in and see what this team is doing. So if a field salesperson is interested in how this work is progressing, they can peek into the group, see what's happening, pop out, and they have some information to move forward with. So again, it's not to say that you have to use Yammer in this way, of course, but we just want to show the breadth of ways that you can use Yammer. So from the top, using Yammer for CEO connection, for those organization connection types, all the way down to the bottom for initiatives related to certain projects.
All right, so let's not necessarily switch gears here, but we're going to talk a little bit about two of our customers who are specifically using Yammer for initiative-based ideas and innovation. And I think we've got a couple of really good examples where either this was a planned initiative or a focused kind of idea generation campaign, and then we also have another idea, an example of where this kind of happened a little bit with a little bit of Yammer magic. So we have a short little video that will kick off.
So Virgin Trains has been running the West Coast Main Line for the past 20 years. I think that people really pride themselves on the experience that they give our customers. It's not like being on any other train in the country, really.
We very much see ourselves as a customer experience company which just happens to run trains, you know.
So the frontline staff make up the majority of our workforce. They're the ones that interact with our customers every day.
On a normal weekday, for instance, we'll have a crew of about 5 or 6 members of staff. So 1 or 2 of them will be based down in the shop, working at trolley and working at the shop. The rest of the crew will be appearing first class, where we'll get the kitchen set up, help the chef prep, make sure the train's fully laid and ready to go, and then we'll start the service.
They told us they wanted to communicate 2 ways. They wanted a voice, they wanted something mobile, they wanted something modern.
Yammer's changed the way that I work completely. I can put a question on there and someone will come back to me relatively quickly, you know, usually within minutes.
I can get commercial information to them really quick. They can get feedback back to me and other colleagues as to what's working, what's not, what's selling well, what customers think about certain products we've got on board.
One example is when our customer experience director posted a particularly hard-hitting set of statistics about our catering revenue and how it wasn't quite up to scratch.
And it was quite a shocking statistic, really, that only 9 out of every 100 customers bought something from the shop on board the train. And in order for the shop to be profitable, we needed to push that figure up to something like 10 or 11 or 12 out of every 100 customers buying something from the shop.
A year later, that's really improved, and that's thanks to hundreds and hundreds of comments and suggestions on products, on prices, on how to serve things, on the trolley service.
Staff have been using it to say, look how well we've done, you know, showing off a little bit, but great, why not blow your own trumpet?
Long story short, 12 months later, 11 out of every 100 customers buy something from the shop, and it's going in the right direction. I see no sign of that slowing down. We can target the people that are in the retail team now. We can say, we don't think this is selling, or passengers have asked us, why aren't we stocking this? They get on another train, they've got this item, why aren't we selling it? So we're able to feed that information back relatively quickly, and we can get changes brought in weeks rather than before it would take months to get anything done. It would have taken letters, carrier pigeon, you name it. It would have been really difficult to reach such a large audience. I can do it in a moment now.
I think Yammer can have a direct impact on customer satisfaction. our people know that they can get an answer on Yammer. So if there's something that they're unsure about, they can go on, find the right group, ask a question, and then feed that back to a customer.
Whether it's policies that we've got which people feel aren't working for them, or travel facilities, or frontline products, or uniform, you name it, we get that feedback in the moment, and we're able to do something about it, and people can see that they've played a part in the direction of the business.
So this is just such a good example about these people being able to share real solutions to real business challenges. So if you want to pop back, yeah, that's the video. So I think the big key thing here is they were sharing some realistic things that were happening, maybe not so positive numbers, and the people who were going to be impacted the most were sharing solutions. And I think sometimes the people who are closest to our customers oftentimes feel furthest away from headquarters or corporate communications or corporate offices, right? And so this is really enabling that two-way communication. I think that for all of you in the room, this is your opportunity to challenge your business owners and your process owners or your process leads within your organization of how do you think about the ways that you change process or you update processes? How do you kind of identify some of the impacts that it will have, and where do you gather feedback? What does that look like today? I think that you're trying to think about how do you bring those first line workers, especially if you have that. How many of you have first line workers or what you'd consider in the room? Okay, good, a good handful, people who are not sitting at desks. And so it's how do you really engage with those types of people? And I think that regardless of region, regardless of tenure, a lot of times, again, they are the ones who are closest to your customers and can really feel some of that impact. Steve, I know you had a good story about this one specifically.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to meet with Virgin Trains in person when we were getting this story, and they're an amazing company, and they talk about how they're really passionate. Their employees are really passionate about the Virgin brand itself. They connect to it in a very deep way, very personally as employees, and so they take great pride in wanting to improve and wanting to provide feedback to make their company as great as they believe that it is. But one of the things that I also thought was interesting is that as they were switching to Yammer, they previous to this, you heard Gary talk about how they used to connect with their employees. It was actually through a magazine, a physical magazine that they would mail to all of their employees. And so one day they said, "All right, we're done with this." The last version of that magazine was focused on the switch to Yammer, the entire magazine. They focused on why we're doing this, what we're doing it, how to do it, and so that was the last version of that magazine that they sent out, and then the next one, everything after that has been on Yammer for them.
And we know that's a reality for a lot of you, or for a lot of the customers that I've worked with is, we actually don't even have Wi-Fi in our stores, or Wi-Fi or like connections available. So we know that the reality is like a printed handout thing that goes on your bulletin board is still very much a reality. So this kind of brings that into I'll say the 21st generation or 21st century. I don't even know if that's where we're at. So kind of that was a good example of those types of feedback and innovation and ideas are coming all the time. But this example specifically with Sanofi is more or less they had kind of more a campaign or a specific initiative about quality improvement. And so they're very passionate about quality anyways. And so again, this is kind of true to their corporate culture. And so for example, I think one of the things that was really interesting about their specific example was one of the guys kind of on the plant floor, I think it was, plant floor, building operator, he had an idea for how to reduce waste. So he posts this on Yammer, and kind of through conversations, they really started to refine the idea, and then essentially it became implemented, and they ended up saving, I think it was like 100,000 euros, not pounds, 100,000 euros a year because of the best practice that one of these building operators suggested in their Yammer group. So kind of an idea here, I think it's really interesting because he kind of started from that concept of the outer loop and really had to kind of work through to refine. So a lot of ideas kind of come from that outer loop, or those people, again, closest to your customers or kind of closest to your product. And he also then kind of worked it in to the inner loop to really get that idea implemented and kind of across from a global perspective.
Yeah, and we're really trying to, I think, this week help people understand this notion of the inner loop and outer loop. And I think by and large, when we've been talking to people, people say, yeah, that makes sense. That seems like how I work. There's a core group of people that I work with. I brainstorm, we get some ideas, and then sometimes I bring it out to the outer loop. But I think also, there's an opportunity to think like this building operator did, where he thought of his outer loop as his inner loop. So he started generating ideas going straight to the outer loop rather than, he understood that the diversity of ideas that he could get is from a broader audience versus starting with a smaller audience. So I think that's kind of an interesting side note about this story.
Absolutely. All right, so we, again, understand that these things don't happen overnight. Steve and I have worked with a lot of customers for a long time, and we understand that change, again, doesn't always magically happen. And I would also say that, yes, there is a lot of serendipity moments that come with Yammer, and there are a lot of Yammer moments that happen. But there are some key best practices that we're going to share with you to kind of, I would say, make the journey a little bit.
Make these things come to life.
Yeah, make it come together, make it happen.
I do want to come back a little bit to the which tool when thing a little bit. I think a lot of times there's a tendency to want one thing that's going to do everything, right? I heard someone once say, imagine if in addition to pivot tables, you could do your presentations in it, you could do your memos in it, you could do your email in it, you could do all these things. It'd be great, wouldn't it? Probably not. It'd probably be kind of, it'd probably be pretty crowded in there. And so we really would like for all of you and to help your employees really think about the best tool for the best job. So if you're working with a small group of people, you're working with people that you're still refining something, you're not quite ready to bring it to a broader audience, Interloop and Teams and even email are great as inner loop type solutions. When you're ready to bring it to a broader audience, whether it be to get feedback or to get more ideas about things, to get broader diversity, to include more people into the work that you're doing, when you're comfortable doing that, we believe that the outer loop in Yammer is the best place for that. And of course, you have things like SharePoint in the middle to tie all those things together as you're sharing your files and your content in a singular place using Office 365 groups.
So kind of, I would say, like, our best practices on one slide it would be start with the outer loop and really, really simply create a public group. And again, I know that this sounds very, very simple, but I think it's a really great starting point. Yes, there will be Yammer magic, but I think from a Disney perspective, you guys are going to need to put a little bit of pixie dust on some of this, and a little bit of work kind of needs to go in from the background, specifically setting a clear purpose for the group. Why does this exist in context to what else we have, or in addition to, or in subtraction of, or how does this fit within my daily work? So really setting a clear purpose within the info. This is also very helpful as you gain executive sponsors or even business owners within your groups as well. And then the third point is identify one or two subject matters to be experts or champions within the group. And these necessarily don't have to be your highest ranking folks within the group. These, in my opinion, the best people for these are your influencers regardless of title, right? These are your people who, when somebody says, where are we going to lunch, and they just say it and everybody just follows them. Like nobody questions where they're off to. These are great people. These are kind of your natural connectors. These would be great people to kind of have as champions within your group and kind of to own the group and to help move the engagement along. And then the last piece, and this is something that I've been working with a couple of different organizations over the last year or so, is to create compelling content by asking questions, sharing documents, posting images, Again, that asking questions is very, very valuable, especially from an executive or a leadership perspective, not only just replying, but asking a question, really being interested in what's being shared. I was working with a group earlier this year, and what we did as an activity was we shared a good post, we shared a better post, and then we talked about what a best post would be, because it's not just about what you share, it's how you share it, right? Anybody can just kind of have a link to a cool article that they read or a great presentation that they listened to, but if you don't give me context to why should I read that article, why is that important to me, and because we're on the same team or in the same region, why should I spend my 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes reading that article or watching that recording if you're not going to tell me why you thought it was valuable? So we did that activity, and it really up-leveled the conversation within the group. The group specifically was a diversity and inclusion group, right? Like, how many more times can you share a diversity and inclusion article? So we were really trying to think of what are some other questions that we could be asking about some of these topics to have more meaningful conversations within that group. So here's also an example, some of the work that we do with customers. I actually have templates of this. I'll show you where to grab some of this because we've done some of this work for you, especially from a template perspective, so you can grab and go. But this is just an example. Again, putting a little bit of thought goes a long way. This stuff isn't hard, but putting a little bit of thought really does go a long way. Goes a long way to get your champions, goes a long way to get your users to understand, okay, this isn't something that is like a shiny new object or flavor of the month. Those are a couple of the terms that I heard at the booth yesterday. So this is really a good opportunity to kind of get serious or get at least mindful about some of the groups and some of the use cases that you're using. And then I would just say lessons learned from the battlefield, especially Steve and I being customers. And so one of the interesting pieces there, we have seen Yammer not be so successful in some organizations and then it be hugely successful. And so here are a couple of the lessons learned. And I won't go through all of them because I know you guys can read, but one of the things that I think is really important is to not have everything to be perfect in order to start. Yammer is one of those things where you can start with 1 or 2 or 3 different specific groups and kind of grow it from there. It lends itself really, really well for that. That kind of makes people a little bit nervous because they have to have everything kind of in a row. But just start small and just kind of keep adding to the Yammer, I would say, community. And then the other piece I would say, just kind of as a side note, is be realistic about your timeline for success, especially if you know that some things are going to take a while, or you have to have some serious conversations with your executive leadership team, or you need to even know the right people to even start some of those conversations. So really be realistic about that.
So we also know from working with a lot of customers that they would like some help. And so over the past year, we've been gathering a list of partners that we know have had tried and true success in helping customers implement and deploy Yammer. Not just the technical deployment, but the more important piece around the change and adoption, creating a good program around making Yammer available to your organization. So this is just a list. There's a AKA short link down there. You can go to that link to get more information or connect with any of these partners. But these are great partners, again, that have real experience of doing this with customers. So we feel confident that if you need help, that they're here to help you too.
All right, and here is an awesome kind of list of resources, aka.ms/yam resources. We literally just put this one live, but this has a lot of templates, editable things that you can pick up and use for your organizations. Please don't reinvent the wheel with this stuff. We have done this. We have worked with lots of customers, and they are there for you if you need governance help, usage policies. I actually created a guide for how to use Yammer to roll out O365. Okay, so that's out there. I am really excited about that one, and that's actually how I found Yammer many moons ago, was rolling out software. And so lots of other opportunities to connect and resources, but again, please don't reinvent the wheel with some of this stuff. We have posters, you name it. Everything's out there for you to kind of pick up and go. And then more resources, a couple brand new things, productivity library, lots of things that you can, again, download to repurpose and reuse for your organization, really trying to make this as seamless as possible. Finally, kind of one of the last couple of slides, we have a happy hour tonight. I know I am quite excited, even though
Free drinks.
I can't
Drinks
drink.
on us.
But from 6 to 9 at Lafayette, 10-minute walk. So, but I don't know if it's 10 minutes from here or like when you get out, because this place is huge. So really, really close.
Just get there and we'll take care of the rest.
We'd love to see you there. A couple other Yammer sessions. Actually, I need to run to one right now. But lots of our customers, actually a couple of you in the room, lots of customers, lots of conversations, really showing some real world how they're doing it, also kind of for the rest of the week.
Customers, partners, Yammer MVPs, great sessions the rest of the week.
And then kind of I would say the final piece is, this is only the start of the conversation. We're going to be at a lot of different events throughout this year, so come find us. And then our last point is, don't be left out of the loop. All right, guys, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the Ignite.
Enjoy your week.